I am Maria Dalton. I am turning 27 this year. I've been married for 5 years and have a son. My son's name is Martin, and he turned 4 this year. Initially, after getting married, I worked as a full-time employee, but now I work part-time at the same company. My husband is 30 years old, 3 years older than me. I was deeply touched by Kevin Carlton's passionate advances, which led us to go out and eventually get married. However, Kevin, who was kind while we were dating, changed his attitude after marriage, showing more of a domineering side. Kevin has a 20-year-old sister named Jane Dalton, and Kevin spoils her, perhaps because they are so far apart in age. Before we got married, I didn't particularly mind this and thought that Jane and Kevin got along well. However, after getting married, I began to notice various changes in her behavior. Jane often visits our house, and each time I end up running around like a maid, because Kevin accepted her selfish demands. Jane comes to our house without any notice, regardless of the time, be it morning or night. Furthermore, Jane never brings any gifts or tokens of appreciation when she visits. Even when I am around, she acts as if I don't exist, and speaks only to Kevin, saying, "Brother, I'm here again." And then Kevin, seeing a dinner that's obviously prepared for only 3 people, asks Jane if she'd like to eat. "Of course, I intended to." When I try to tell Kevin quietly that I haven't prepared dinner for Jane, he simply tells me to figure something out since his sister is visiting, and in the end I have to serve my portion of dinner to Jane. Then, loud enough for Jane to hear, he blames me, saying things like, "You should have been considerate enough to make extra food." Hearing Kevin's words, Jane looks as if she's about to cry and apologizes to me. Kevin comforts her with kind words and scolds me, saying things like, "You're not thoughtful," or "Don't be mean to my sister." Although Jane apologizes with words, every time I see that she is reassured by the fact that Kevin treats her more precisely than me. It seems she takes joy in it. I prepare my own meal from leftovers in the fridge, and just when I think I will start eating with Kevin, Jane, and Martin, Jane tells Kevin she has something she wants to discuss with him alone. "You should leave the table. Martin, eat with your mom." Kevin moves me and Martin to another room. This isn't the first time he's done this. After Martin and I finish our meal and head to the kitchen for cleanup, I find Kevin and Jane chatting happily on the sofa. The dishes from their meal are still on the dining table, untouched. They never bother to clean up. I suspect they see me not as a wife or sister-in-law, but more like a maid. They never speak to Martin either. It's as if a maid brought her child to work. I cleaned up in the kitchen and was about to take a bath with Martin when Kevin called me loudly. Even though it was nearly 8 p.m., he said, "Jane wants to eat a cake. Go buy it now. Get the one they sell in front of the station." Even specifying where to buy it from. Going to the cake shop will delay Martin's bedtime. As I hesitated, Jane said to Kevin, "I want it now." And Kevin hurried me. "It's okay if he sleeps late today. What's with that attitude when Jane is here?" Kevin started blaming me loudly. I knew I'd end up going to the cake shop, so I reluctantly decided to go. The cake shop near the station closes at 9 p.m., so if I hurry, I can make it. As I was getting ready, I overheard their conversation. They spoke loudly enough for me to hear, saying things like, "She's so inconsiderate, and why did you marry her?" I couldn't leave Martin behind, so I decided to take him with me. As I was getting him ready, I heard Kevin's loud voice from the living room. "If you defy me again, we'll get a divorce." Martin could hear it too. He might not understand the words, but I believe he knows his parents are fighting. Holding back my explosive emotions, I asked Martin, "What kind of cake would you like?" He brightened up, saying, "Mom, I want a cake with lots of fruits." So our journey to the cake shop was filled with talk of cakes, temporarily forgetting Kevin's words. Martin and I reached the cake shop just before closing time. Luckily, the cake Jane wanted was available. We bought 2 cakes and 1 fruit-loaded cake Martin wanted. Upon returning home, I served the cakes to Jane and Kevin. Then I prepared Martin's cake and headed to the dining room. The moment I placed it in front of Martin, Jane pointed at it and said, "I want that cake after all." Before I could react, Kevin moved the cake Martin had chosen in front of Jane. Ignoring Martin's protests, Jane started eating his cake. Kevin said, "I bought that cake with the money I earned, and I have the right to choose," to Martin. I couldn't hold back my emotions any longer and voiced my dissatisfaction to Kevin and Jane. Kevin then threatened, "We can get a divorce, you know." Martin stopped crying, but held my hand tightly, looking anxious. And then Martin, after some thought, said, "Mom, I also love cake with strawberries on it. Yes, it's really delicious." He mentioned it while eating a cake that Jane initially wanted to eat. I feel like I'm making Martin endure too much. There are 3 adults, including me, making a 4-year-old child put up with this. I lifted Martin's cake plate the moment I saw Jane reach for Martin's cake after hearing Martin saying, "Yummy." "Martin, let's eat over there." I took him to the next room so he could eat his cake slowly. Probably Kevin saw Jane reaching for the cake as well. He apologized to Jane, saying, "Sorry for being so stingy." I wanted to retort, but I held back, not wanting to expose Martin to the word divorce. Watching Martin innocently eating his cake with cream around his mouth is a sight that cleanses the heart. After finishing the cake, ignoring both Kevin and Jane, we decided to have a late bath and sleep in Martin's bed. The next morning, I woke up to find Jane had already left. I was about to wake up Kevin and Martin and prepare breakfast when I heard Martin's crying and rushed to him. Shockingly, the piggy bank Martin had, which was given by my father, was broken, and the money he had saved up was gone. It was a ritual for him to say goodnight to the piggy bank before sleeping. Last night was no different. He said goodnight and went to sleep with me. At that time, the only people in the living room were Kevin and Jane. I asked Kevin about the piggy bank. "Jane said she needed some money, so she took it from the piggy bank," he said, indifferently, even though Martin was still crying. As I held Martin, who was crying and shaking, I could feel his hurt so painfully that I cried with him. It hurts to see Kevin prioritize and care for his sister Jane more than our son, Martin. I felt a surge of anger and sadness at the same time. "Why are you making the atmosphere so bad in the morning? I feel terrible," Kevin coldly exclaimed. "Don't you think you did something wrong? Martin is crying so much." For the first time since our marriage, I expressed my anger towards him. I had always been careful not to argue in front of Martin, but I couldn't stay silent, seeing him so hurt. Kevin looked at me intensely, went to the bedroom without a word, and came back with something in his hand. Shockingly, it was divorce papers, which I didn't even know he had hidden somewhere. "If you're not happy with me, then let's divorce," he said, shoving these papers at me, and then he left the house with a loud bang. Martin, who had never cried over the issues with Kevin and Jane, must have reached his limit. He has been crying since last night. I can't bear to see Martin so hurt. "Hey, Martin, should we skip daycare today?" He was perhaps happy to be with me and replied with a loud "Yes!" showing me a faint smile. Martin, after bringing a picture book from the bookshelf and sitting on my lap, looks up at me happily and says, "The teacher at the nursery today was Mama, right? He looks like an angel." I think his little heart must be full of patience. Today, I decided that we would play as much as we can to fill his heart. I might be causing trouble at my workplace, but when I explained the situation, they kindly said, "Make sure to play a lot with Martin," and gave me a day off. In the morning, we went to the park, played hide and seek, and had a lot of fun in the sandbox and on the slide. When we got home and were having lunch, Martin seemed to be getting sleepy. He usually can nap by himself, but today he fell asleep on my lap, just like when he was a baby. I wanted to do the household chores while Martin was napping, but I thought today is special and decided to be healed by his sleeping face and breathing. While I was dozing off, suddenly I heard a noise from the entrance. It sounded like the front door had opened, but it wasn't time for Kevin to come home yet. so I was suspicious. I quickly grabbed Martin and, taking only my bag with valuables, hid in the bedroom closet. I felt someone entering the house and was holding my breath when I heard a voice. It was a voice I had heard somewhere before, and that person seemed to be searching the house for something.
I can't find it. Where has that wife hidden it?
For a while I was trembling in fear due to the noise of rummaging, but as I listened carefully to that voice, I realized who it was. It was Jane's voice. I have so many questions like, why does she have a key? And what is she looking for? But I opened the closet slightly to see what Jane was doing. She was roughly opening and closing drawers and doors. After letting out a big sigh, she started making a phone call.
I searched where I was told, but it wasn't there. Yeah, I checked there too. If it's not there, it was a waste of time. Okay, I got it. I'm going home now, Kevin.
She clearly said Kevin. I wondered what the two of them were looking for. I then heard the sound of the front door locking. After coming out of the closet, I put Martin to bed and thought about what had just happened. I am pretty sure Kevin knows about his belongings. If they were searching for something that's location wasn't known, could it be one of my belongings? However, from the conversation earlier, I couldn't figure out why she had entered the house. Suddenly, Kevin seemed like a stranger, and I felt a mixture of disgust and fear towards him. I hurriedly packed the bare essentials for Martin and me. By the time Martin woke up from his nap, I was ready to go. Martin, let's go to Grandpa's place now. With that said, we headed to the station and took a train to my parents' house. Luckily, my parents' home is nearby, just 2 stations away, so we arrived quickly. I hadn't contacted them beforehand, so they were surprised, but looking at my face, they seemed to sense something and welcomed us in without asking anything. Their pet dog, which Martin loves, immediately approached him, and they started playing together. Seeing this, I felt relieved and told my parents everything that had happened with Kevin and Jane, and that I had become scared to stay at our house. As you say, if Jane was looking for your belongings, it might be your cash cards. Hearing my mother's words, I also thought the same. In fact, I have experience of launching a successful online shop for handmade goods with my friends when I was single, with me as the CEO. In the handmade industry, I became well known, and when the shop grew significantly, I decided to get married. I wanted to prioritize raising my child, so I entrusted the company to my trustworthy friends until my child rearing settled down. Now I work part-time and mostly communicate with the company from home. The truth is I'm still the CEO, but Kevin doesn't know that. However, he knows that I was a CEO when I was single, and probably suspects that I have a decent amount of savings. I've told him that I still get help from the company, but I've left the company matters to my friends, so he probably thinks I've stepped down from the CEO position. There's a reason I haven't told Kevin in detail about still being the CEO and about the savings. Soon after we got married, I realized that he's bad with money and spends all he earns. He only gave me $200 for food expenses a month, and even told me to quit my job and become a full-time housewife. With Martin and only $200 for food expenses, it's tough to live, and I've never agreed to become a full-time housewife. Eventually, he reluctantly agreed to let me work part-time at the current company. Moreover, to ensure I wouldn't consider divorce, he even made me sign a post-marital property waiver through a lawyer. Since Martin was born, I've only received $200 for food, so I've been using my savings for Martin's nursery fees and clothes. I've never asked Kevin for money beyond the food budget, so he probably thinks I have savings. Jane seems to be in dire need of money, and since Kevin thinks I have savings, he might be looking for my cash cards. It all makes sense now. I have a separate savings account that I am slowly saving for Martin. Every month, a portion of my salary is directly deposited into that account. Either way, there's a high chance these two are looking for my cash cards. They're both in need of money, and I can't think of anything else they'd be searching for. However, no matter how much Jane or Kevin search, they won't find it because I always carry my valuable items like my cash cards. There's still an unresolved issue. Jane might be coming and going from our house even when we're not there, and Kevin might be allowing it. My father advised me to keep my valuables at my parents' house, so I decided to store them in their safe. Why do they need money to the extent of doing such things? While pondering over the answer to that question, Martin came up to my father crying, explaining that his piggy bank was broken and he couldn't keep his promise to save up. My father's face turned red, and he became angry when he heard Martin's story. I'll call Kevin and talk to him. My mother chided my father and said, Now let's find out what their purpose is. My mother said that since Kevin is talking about divorce, he might say that it is our fault and make the divorce more favorable, so it is better to calmly find out what their purpose is now so that they cannot escape with a suitable excuse. I decided to record their conversation in order to find out what the purpose was. My parents said they would consult a lawyer, who was a friend of my father's and a longtime family friend, so we decided to go home. I arrived home and was cooking dinner when Kevin came home. I immediately started recording on my phone and kept the phone screen down so that he would not find it. To my surprise, he came home and immediately asked me where I kept my cash cards. When I asked him why he wanted to know where I kept it, he gave me vague answers, as if he was trying to deceive me. When I remained silent, Kevin became numb and said, Give me all your part-time money for my sister. I replied, I can't do that. It's for Martin's savings. Kevin became angry and pushed the signed divorce papers from his bag to me. You're living on my money, so don't stand on me. You don't have to save for Martin. And that I would not be able to make a living if I divorced him, and he said these words as if he valued Jane more than Martin. After hearing these words, I silently stopped preparing the meal, put the divorce papers in the bag I had prepared, took Martin's hand, and went to the door. Kevin said in a loud voice, I'm serious about the divorce. Don't ever come back. So I said, I will never come back to a house where a stranger can come and go as she pleases, and left the house. Was it too much to say my sister-in-law was a stranger? Soon after I left home, I received a large number of messages and calls from Kevin, but I ignored all of them, turned off my phone, and went to my parents' house. I then asked my parents to listen to the recording I had just made, and also to look at the completed divorce papers Kevin had given me. My parents told me to do as you please. I had no love or affection for Kevin. I told them that I had no love or affection for Kevin, but that I still cared about Martin. They said that I should divorce him so as not to hurt Martin's feelings, but there is also a great possibility that if you divorce, you will hurt Martin's feelings. While I was struggling with this decision, Martin said he was hungry, so my mother made him hamburgers, his favorite dish. I couldn't hold back my tears as my mother told Martin with a kind smile, I prepared the hamburgers so that you and Mom can come visit us whenever you want. After taking a bite of the hamburger, Martin said with a big smile, Grandma's hamburger is so good. I want to eat it every day. He said to my mother with a big smile on his face. I said, That's because this hamburger contains the feeling that I love Martin. And he took a big bite of the hamburger and put it in my mouth. This hamburger with lots of my love in it is delicious. Mom, please eat this hamburger with me and cheer yourself up. Touched by Martin's kindness, my tear gland collapsed. I tried to stop my tears, but they couldn't stop. My father told Martin, who was in a panic, Mommy is crying because she's so happy that you gave her this hamburger. These are not sad tears, but happy tears. He told Martin slowly. This hamburger is so delicious. If Jane were here, she would have eaten it, said Martin. Upon hearing this, the mother broke into tears and hugged him. Watching this, the father's eyes turned bright red. I said to Martin, It's a blessing to be with family, isn't it? He looked surprised and responded, Didn't Dad say that only Jane was family? Is my family just Mom and Grandpa and Grandma? My father replied gently, Yes, that's right. He then continued, asking Martin, Do you want to live here with us as family? To which he replied with a laugh,
Of course, we're family,
making everyone naturally smile. When was the last time we had such a natural meal? When did we last have a meal filled with endless laughter and conversation? Although I was considering divorce, this meal feels so happy that I finally decided to part with Kevin and planned to tell Martin about it. Discussing this made my heart heavy, but it seemed Martin never felt loved by his father and understood about the divorce, happily saying,
"We will live as a family."
And he happily hugged the pet dog, calling him my younger brother, even though the dog is older than him. I started preparations for the divorce. Firstly, I quickly contacted a lawyer who was a friend of my father, and we arranged to meet the next day. That night, Martin slept with my father and the dog, and I remember feeling comforted by their faint laughter. I laid in bed in the same room as my mother and fell asleep, reminiscing about my childhood. The next day, when I turned on my smartphone, there were over 200 calls and messages from Kevin showing his emotional instability. Just seeing it exhausted me, so I turned off my smartphone again. Today, I was able to discuss with a lawyer, explaining the details and confirming my intention to divorce. We successfully formalized the contract, and the lawyer will meet with Kevin tomorrow. After a while, the lawyer came to my parents' house to explain the situation. It seems Jane had accumulated a significant debt from the casino and her shopping addiction, and Kevin acted as her guarantor. When Jane couldn't make the repayments, a plan was devised to use my savings, and now Kevin wants me and Martin back and not divorcing me. The lawyer said the divorce papers I handed over at that time had already been submitted. When asked if this meant the divorce was accepted, the lawyer confirmed, "Yes, it has been accepted." Kevin seemed to have sobbed, saying that he doesn't want another man to get me. But hearing that everything was finalized gave me peace of mind. I expected disagreements about child support, but he even signed a pledge to pay $340 to Martin every month. Later, I received a call from Kevin. Feeling relieved after the divorce procedures, I decided to talk briefly. His tone lacked its previous aggression, and he calmly began talking. He believed that if he kept me financially bound, I wouldn't think of divorce. He also admitted to spoiling his younger sister, Jane, thinking it was a form of sibling love. He wasn't indifferent towards Martin, but became jealous, thinking he had lost me to him. "Once I settle Jane's debts, I'll come for you. Please, don't remarry till then," he said, but I firmly told him I no longer loved him and wouldn't reconsider. I could faintly hear his sobbing before he said, "Please, be happy," and hung up. Did I manage to remain strong till the end? I discussed future life with my parents and decided to stay at their house until Martin grows up. He also transferred to a different nursery. I returned to my role as company president after explaining the situation to my work friends. Later, I heard that Kevin and Jane informed their parents about the divorce and their debt, resulting in both being disowned. More than the debt, they were furious about never seeing their grandson again. The once close Kevin and Jane now live in a cramped old apartment, constantly blaming each other. They've brought this upon themselves. Today, I'm happy being with my family.